Hey everyone, Tactics here, and this is my final Mythic raid guide of nerub-ar Palace, where we're going to be covering Queen ANSUREK to hopefully help you and your group get your cutting edge achievement. This guide is going to be considering the recent significant nerf this boss received in the middle of November, and also be covering things like useful WeakAuras, how to set up your method raid tools node, important raid assignments, and much more. Be aware though, the VOD that I am going to be covering here and all the prep that I'll be going over with you guys was of course done before the actual boss nerfs went in, but I will point out where things are done differently for you guys, specifically fighting this boss post nerf, just to make your lives easier, as the nerfs were pretty impactful, and we'll go over those in the video as well. Now, this is going to be a long one, so let's not waste any more time, and let's quickly hop in here and talk about the changes to Mythic difficulty. So phase one of the bigger changes is with the reactive toxins. These are the circles that spawn on players that you then need to soak. Basically, the first spawn of these debuffs is on 2 players, and then the second and third spawn will now have 3 players that get debuffed. So you'll need to split your group accordingly, and we'll go over that in a second here. On top of this, when you actually end up detonating these, you get this toxic reaction debuff now. So basically, any detonation you do puts this debuff on the entire raid, and it's a 2000% damage taken increase from the detonation. So that's when you have a player in the circle touch the froth in the middle, this applies that debuff to the entire raid, not just the players in the circle, which means you have to detonate the circles 1 second apart. So you can't do them all at the same time like a lot of people did on heroic. They have to be staggered. There's also the lingering toxic dot here. Again, once you do the soak, there's that debuff that goes out on the raid, and then after a few seconds it pops for damage. That's what frothy toxin is from heroic. And now after frothy toxin pops, it is also going to put a dot with the same number of stacks that the frothy toxin had on the raid for 10 seconds. So just some additional raid damage coming in this phase, and this can get pretty scary going into the intermission, as you will have this dot for the start of that phase. Speaking of the intermission, the biggest thing would be the rest casts, which are not just only in the intermission, right? This also happens in P2 as well. They now spawn this grasping silk, which is basically a web puddle that grows underneath players. So you are going to have web puddles taking up more space in both the intermission and phase 2. So that's pretty significant. You're going to be having less space. Moving on to phase 2, the brand new mechanic in this phase is Shadowgate. This is basically a purple portal that spawns on each side, and they have a time limit essentially, and they start glowing red, and they'll blow up and wipe the raid unless you send a player through the portal. And this trades places essentially. You basically need to swap one player from one side with another player from the other side, and they go through the portal and they end up on the opposite side. They also end up with that same gloom magic debuff from the heroic and normal versions of the fight. So there is going to be an extra debuffs on Mythic difficulty because of this. On top of this, I believe these puddles now also, I don't remember if gloom was on heroic or not, but these will also drop a puddle. So you want to put these in pretty specific spots, which I will go through in P2. Outside of that, the only other difference for P2 is the second platform on each side has some additional adds. So on one side, there's an extra one of the melee adds that does the tank buster, and on the other side there's actually 2 brand new mobs called chamber acolytes, which kind of hang off the edge, which can't be hit by melee super well unless they have extra range. And so basically what you tend to do is you tend to focus range DPS on one side and melee DPS on the other. That's P2. For P3, pretty similar, kind of like the increasing number of reactive toxins you get in P1. In P2, you actually get an increasing number of adds. So the first spawn of adds has 3, and then every other spawn of adds after that, so the second and third, are going to have 4 adds for you to deal with. That on its own is not like a huge deal, but the really big deal is these acolyte essences that they drop. So previously you just had anyone pick these up, and then as long as these didn't touch the actual ring coming in, you were fine. Now, these never go away. So when a player picks one up, it will drop back down on the ground when the dot expires. And of course, you still get that debuff, the essence card here, which makes you take a ton of extra damage, meaning non-tank players can't really do this more than one time. Otherwise, they're just going to die to the dot. So in total, you'll need 10 players, 3 on the first set and then 7 on the second set, to make sure they are picking up these acolyte essences. Again, unless you double up on tanks who can do both sets technically. Finally, last change here. Again, not a new mechanic, but the actual, where is it here? The Royal Condemnation, the shackles that spawn. This now spawns on 3 players instead of 2. So some additional damage and additional tethers that you will have to destroy when this actually goes out. Those are all the changes, quite a bit. Now let's open up my sheet here. There's the ANSUREK video. Again, pretty significant nerfs here across the board. I'm not going to go super in depth in them here because it don't really make a ton of sense. But essentially, it took some of the overlaps, which I will show you in our VOD, and it entirely removed them. And I will tell you what you need to do differently. It also made things like destroying the Silken Tombs, which are the roots, a lot easier because they got way less health. Becomes a more viable strategy. And also just generally drastically helps with the consistency of phase 1 in particular, but also phase 3, which is super nice to see. Now, let's talk a little bit about prep. Now, again, just like in the previous video, I have some raid plan images here, which I'm not really going to go into. I'm going to link them in the description for you guys if you want to go through them, but I think just going through the video itself is much better. Also, because again, these are pre-nerf raid plans, and I'm going to tell you exactly what is different because there are going to be some differences here in the overlaps that exist between the pre-nerf version and the post-nerf version. Now, there's also some setup. I want to get into setup here, and as well, WeakAuras. So as usual, our guild, we did use the Northern Palace ones. Let me drag that over here. Northern Sky. We use these. If your guild has been using the Liquid WeakAura packs now that it is out, feel free to continue using that. It doesn't really matter. It's going to change the syntax a little bit in the note when I go over that, but very minor adjustments, pretty easy to do. Now let's talk about the assignments. So there were quite a few assignments we made for this pre getting into this boss. This is the first one. This is the root breaks. And so basically the general strategy here was to have as few Silken Tomb roots not broken as possible, using a combination of whatever classes have to self-break freedoms, whether that's talents, holding CDs sometimes, it'll be like Vanish, for example, for Rogue sometimes, racials, like the Gnome racial actually works on this, or, you know, helping others with, you know, Tiger's Lust or Master's Call, that kind of thing. So freedom, right? There's a lot of things that can be used here to break the actual roots and basically mean you never need to kill them and you can just instantly keep moving after the roots happen, because the roots tend to happen just before Webblade, which can be very, very dangerous if you don't break them very quickly. Now, this was planned. I believe there's also one set where we just didn't. Yeah, we had one set where I believe both our evokers didn't get broken out on the third set here. But the important thing to note, you now only need to plan for these 3 sets. This 4th set has been removed with the nerfs, this 216 one. And so you only need to plan for these. And again, this is how we planned it out. It's okay to do some breaks, especially with a 30% health nerf to the Silken Tombs. It's much, much more forgiving. But also, you probably want to do your best to have as little roots as possible still. Some specs do need access to that time spiral in order to clear it. Off the top of my head, I think it's Warlocks need their port reset. Shamans need their Spirit Walk reset. I'm not 100% sure who else needs it. Some specs just can't do it without an external or gnome racial, like priests up here. You know, we had 2 hunters, so they were alternating Master's Call on him. The rogue and the monk, I believe, yeah, they both had to switch to gnome in order to get that done. So and our demon hunter too here was always just freedomed by our Ret Paladin. So some specs just need more help than others, and just do your best here to minimize the number of breaks that need to happen. Then we have the popping groups, because again, you do need to split your raid accordingly in the 2 groups that spawn on the first set of toxins, and then the 3 groups that spawn on the second and third sets of toxins. You can see here, pre-nerf, again, there were 4 toxins on the final set here. You now can ignore that, and what you can do is you can just copy and paste your group 2 and your group 3 and just have people be in the same soak for the second toxins and the third toxins. The only thing that needs to change, of course, is the person popping. You need to put someone else as the popper for the second group versus the third group, but you can keep them the exact same in terms of who is in those groups. For how this looks like in the note, yeah, I believe we have it here. So this is how the notes look like for the Northern Sky. You basically just list them out. And how this works with the WeakAura in the Northern Sky pack is it assigns the first person as the person to pop. And then if for whatever reason you know, like say this first group, Hawk was dead, it would now assign the second person to be the popper, and it would pop up on their screen saying that they are assigned to pop the actual toxin. So this automatically kind of has backup protection built into it. Rest of this note is P2, so we will get into that when we get to P2. Let's do a little bit of a walkthrough here for P1, because it's probably the hardest phase, I think, of the encounter. So you can see here, this is the entrance of the boss room. So we're just one line to the right of the entrance, and this is where we want to pull the boss initially, because there is a liquefy right off the top of the fight. So this liquefy is going to go out. We're going to be all under the boss, baiting the pools here to kind of conserve space. So all of these pools are going to go out here. We are having the blood DK take the liquefies, and I'm as the guardian druid, I'm taking the feasts. I think you could swap that if you wanted. It doesn't, I think most tanks are probably capable of doing both. I think like brewmasters probably favor doing the feast. I think Venge Demon Hunters probably favor doing the liquefy, but like every tank can probably do both to a degree. Like guardian druids have done both, blood DKs have done both. So it's kind of depending on who you want carrying the boss for this phase. In particular, because obviously whoever is taking the feast is also the one kind of controlling a large portion of the boss movement. So here it is. First feast comes out. We're not going to do a super big move, just stepping slightly away to the outside of this green stuff, because we're now going to have the roots immediately after. And again, we're trying to conserve space here because this stuff is all staying for this entire phase, and we're going to have to play the intermission based on what we fill up. So you can see we all have relatively, it's not like hard assigned spots, but basically what tended to happen is we kind of figured out our spots, and you just kept going to the same place. That was very, very important. Kept going to the same place here to, again, a consistency thing, kind of throwing back to Silken Court, doing the same thing every pull. Being consistent is going to help you out here. It's going to conserve you more space. Honestly, the space here is not super big, not a super big deal. We do some pretty large movements here in this portion of the fight, but save space where you can, right? And so again, you're going to see all the tombs break out here. And then we're going to have web blades where, again, we're not moving super far. And at the same time, you have the two toxins come out. Now, something to note about these toxins. You can see there are head markers on the toxin players. Usually, you just kind of ignore those head markers. Don't worry about the head markers. Look at the positioning of the debuffed players. When you get debuffed with this, where is the other debuffed person? You can see here, that person is behind them. And so one person's going to be the melee group, one person's going to be the range group. It's just very obvious here that this closer person should go towards melee, right? And that's kind of what happens throughout the fight. It gets a little bit more complicated when this goes up to 3, obviously, because you kind of have to adjust accordingly. But just use comms, right? Call out if someone's very, very mobile and it's like pretty close. Just be like, hey, I got close, or I got mid, or whatever. And that'll help stop some wipes, because we had some wipes where people were kind of unsure where to go. Comms were being used, and they end up stacking or putting stuff in a weird spot. Just use your voice here and use a little bit of common sense in terms of who's closer, who's further. These can kind of go wherever. You don't need to do these here. Like a lot of the times, this melee one wasn't this far away. It was like here-ish. A lot of people also put like the ranged one here and the melee one here. That's all fine. Any of that, it's not a huge deal where these ones go. And then these are going to be popped. And again, the big thing is these cannot be popped at the same time, and that's why that week where I was counting down there, because this debuff here, if they had popped at the same time, everyone's dead. So that's the debuff you need to wait for. That's the debuff you need to watch. And I believe the liquid pack has a weak aura that is like red when you have the debuff and shouldn't pop, and then turns green when you're fine. So that could be a useful one for you guys to grab. And then of course, debuff players, the poppers run out. And now we're going to move back onto the existing puddles here, because we are dropping another liquefy. So this is just, again, to conserve more space early on in the phase when things are less hectic. And so again, the DPS kind of hug up against the existing stuff, and the tank goes into the actual stuff. Boom, liquefy. And then we do a pretty decent sized movement here, because we're going to go roots into that again. So again, we get the roots. They see me rotating over to my spot, drop all the webs here, and then we keep moving here, and we're moving into the second Nova here, followed by web blades. This web blades is why we're doing a pretty significant movement, because we're going to drop all of the puddles behind us. So move to here, And this gives us space. And again, we throw markers out. You don't need to constantly throw markers out. A lot of guilds throw markers out initially. We just have one player with each marker basically bound. I have star bound, and then eventually, usually these gets pulled off, but we just kept doing it. And so again, the debuffs are going to come out. This is going to be 3 novas now. It's going to come out right after these web blades. And something about these web blades you can do makes it a little bit easier is these web blades are player targeted, right? So you can see here what we do is the entire melee group is stacked up on this foot of the boss, and we stack up for all 4 spawns in our case of the web blades. So you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we move to just kind of bait, anything that spawns on us or is essentially baited, and it leaves these 2 nice open pockets on either side of us to dodge. You only have to wait for 3 spawns because this is post-nerf. There's only 3 of these instead of 4, so that makes it a little bit easier and a little bit less difficult, and also not as required or to actually do the stack up there that we did. But it is very, very nice. I will say it was pretty useful. So again, we have the next ones. They're in a line. We go to our assigned spots. Everything is 1 second apart, 1 second apart, 1 second apart. 3 players get out, give us a lot of nice space in melee, and then we are again dodging here. And this is a super scary overlap because there's a lot of heavy movement going on here, and there's immediately a liquefy. So there's a pop of this debuff, there's a liquefy going out, and there's a dot. This is, you can see here, personals are assigned for this burst and this liquefy. You want to press a personal here. This is a very, very scary overlap for most of the raid. Oh, we made noise go out. And there's also a swap here, of course, like I said, liquefy. And then we do a pretty big move and just get out of that corner. We're going to drop more puddles. We don't really care about dropping these puddles right up against this existing green, because basically we want to end another line past this, which is directly across from where we started. So we basically filled up half the room with stuff. So we're not really concerned about conserving space at this point in the fight because we've conserved so much space leading up to this point in the fight. So we do our break here, and this is also the one where the silken tombs from the evokers are real. We have to kill these. So you can see here the positioning has slightly changed, where our demon hunter and our fury warrior position closer to the frontier, and the 2 evokers just come here and they stand right here and they get cleaved out. Drag the boss over top of them, make sure they get instantly cleaved out, and then we move to this line here. And this is where things would change for you guys specifically. These roots that are coming up here are roots 4. They no longer exist. So basically what you would do here is you would ignore this whole gate strategy that we're doing, which is used to conserve space and get into a good position to bait all the stuff. And instead, you would just walk the boss to this spot. You would just walk the boss to this spot on the gate here, or just wherever you want to be positioned for this phase. And all of the melee would stack up on that spot. You don't need to do what we're doing here because we're basically baiting another set of puddles underneath the boss. We have these puddles. The 3 toxins would go out. You'd go to your 3 marks. And then we basically are baiting the puddles and taking the gate. You don't need to do this. You just need to go to immediately move to the other side of the gate when you're doing this movement, and then drop all the puddles behind you, almost exactly like the second drop, right? We move the boss past where we're dropping everything, and then you put the 3 things down behind you, and then you go and step into them. That's exactly what you would do now. So ignore everything we just did. Repeat what you just did for the second set instead. Again, just with a new popper for each of the sets, but use the same groups. Again, no need for some extra work there on your part. So we're doing this a little bit differently. Like, we're going to have 4 here, so you can ignore that. We're going to be taking a bit more damage here. And now we're going into the intermission. Again, pretty similar in terms of what's going on here, except this damage this is where it gets scary. We throw down like darkness and spirit link, and you can see we're kind of clustered here because this is about to pop, and then we're about to get a dot on top of that, and then we're about to get rest damage on top of that. So all that is very, very spooky, and so defensives and health pots, don't be afraid to use them early on in progression especially. And again, the spirit link is really, really helpful. Now, let's talk about this rest. This does drop web puddles now, and so you can easily get yourself out of space if you are dropping web puddles too close to melee. And this includes anyone that is out here immuning the knockback. If you are immuning the knockback, what you will see on this next rest coming up in 4 seconds is anyone immuning the knockback here that doesn't specifically have AMS running. AMS prevents a web puddle from spawning, but if you are just immuning the knockback, or the pull-in rather, you see they're pressing a defensive and they are moving into the existing web puddles. and that is because they still spawn web puddles even if you immune the pull-in. And if you do this like here, you're just going to fill all of melee with web. So again, if you are any of those specs preventing the pull-in, whether that's Death Advance, if you don't have AMS up, I think we probably had a bop on a couple people. Bop prevents the pull-in, but it does not stop you from spawning a web puddle. Whoever else is ignoring this pull-in. I think our hunter's like turtle or something like. I don't know if that actually. I think it just turtles to walk through the waves. I don't know that turtle actually does anything to stop that from happening. But basically, if you are not pressing AMS during the pull-in, you need to be out in the goo to drop webs out in the goo and not in melee itself. Your goal here is to interrupt the third rest. So you're going to get the first rest right after the intermission starts. You're going to get the second rest, which, you know, a lot of people are immuning or just running back to the far end. And then you're going to have this third rest in 8 seconds, which you want to interrupt. You don't want to go too fast here, at least for our comp. We did want to go like after the rest had started. So we late in progression did end up calling for us to kind of chill on damage a little bit here. But as long as you're, you know, a few seconds into that rest cast, you're good. And then this goes into phase 2, where we're going to take a short break here and look back at some more prep stuff to get you started for phase 2. Quickly though, Bloodlust. Let's talk about Bloodlust, because I am getting very close to thinking that you should just be lusting on pull for damage. And I think that's correct after these nerfs. I think it is correct to lust on pull with all your damage CDs and pots and everything like that. And that will help you in the long run in P3, because no one is going to be pushing this boss early, right? It's like 35% health to push this boss early, which is just not going to happen. So all the damage you do in P1 is real boss damage that you do. We ended up lusting in P3 to help with an ad set, but a lot of that stuff in P3 has been made a bit easier with the changes. So you could do our lust when we get to that. We'll talk about that, but I think it is better to lust on pull at this point in progression if you're getting to this boss. Now let's get to the prep for P2. So here is our P2 assignment. So this is basically showing who is on the side closest to the entrance. This is the left side of the columns. The right side of the columns is the side furthest from the entrance, which are hereby called melee team and range team. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Melee team and range team. Basically, the goal here, or the point of this, is to basically show who's on each side just before you go to the next platform. And the reason for that is because you are going to be swapping people, like I mentioned, using those shadow gates, which you'll see in a few minutes here. Now, in terms of who you're swapping, this has also changed with the debuff being reduced to 30 seconds. Previously, it was long enough that you basically could never swap anyone more than once, which is why you ended up trading healers on this first platform, because you just kind of ran out of people to actually trade eventually. You don't necessarily need to trade healers anymore. You could just trade DPS. You could also assign people to trade multiple times if you wanted to. I expect that we won't be changing our trade assignments at this point, but I think I could be very, very smart to just not change a healer at all, because the healing can be quite spooky, especially specifically right after these shadow gates, because they create an extra debuff on both sides. So potentially you don't swap healers here, and you could do something like one of your late swaps is also the exact same as this first swap. That's probably what I recommend doing, is one of these swaps that you're doing later on in the fight, you just do again at the beginning of the fight. Something to keep in mind is you will want a significant number of ranged players on this far platform, this ranged platform as I called it, which means that you're going to end up putting melee players on the other platform. And the reason for that is those new ads that I was talking about, which hang off the platform and need to be both interrupted and killed, but they can't really be hit by a lot of melee abilities. So because of that, you're going to see a lot of our initial comp. You see, we have quite a few melee on the range side, but then we end up doing multiple swaps before we get to the second platform, with a melee from the range side moving to the other side, and then a ranged from the melee side coming to join our side in advance of P2. And that's kind of how we figured it out. Something to note, this second swap of the first platform, we had to actually stop DPS later in progression to make sure this actually happened. We accidentally pushed too fast multiple times in progression and prevented this from happening, which is very, very bad, because we needed this mage on our side. So I expect that this change might be getting cut as we gain more gear, but I would just say have this potentially plan to still do it, but it kind of play it by ear, especially if there is any more damage gains from the raid buff you're getting, and you start just nuking these platforms, then potentially you may need to take this off, but I think we're going to keep it at least for now. And then there are some additional swaps. Like I said, there's an image here, and this image is actually pretty good in terms of showing like where you want to drop things off, because like I said, the debuffs, when you come through the portal, you're gonna have a debuff. You want to put the puddle somewhere decent. The rests, you can see here, this is an image of the rests happening. When they happen, they leave puddles on the ground, so you don't want to put the rests towards the ramp to go up to the next platform. You want to put it on the opposite side, that kind of thing. This will be linked in the description again for you. And then we have this, which we did plan out our CDs here to have, make sure we just had damage for every single platform, so we got through them in a timely manner and also in a relatively same time as the opposite side. So we did plan out our cooldowns a bit here, and then this is the kind of little picture of what we planned out for our cooldowns there. Now again, for the note, P2, we did put the sides in. We have the gate here. This is for the gate WeakAura to pop up and tell the person who's getting traded that they are getting traded and that they need to go in with a timer and all that stuff. So there's that. And there is also these here, because there are going to be multiple sets of interrupts on this in this phase rather. So you have the initial guy, the Gloom Blast guy. There's going to be 2 of those in each side, right? So that's what this, I believe it's this first one and the second one are that. That is the, and you notice we use different markers here because there's different people on each side. And so what we had here is I had one set of the marks. I believe I had Moon and Square, and then the other tank had the other sets of marks, Circle and X, and we just manually marked those ads to make sure this kick order popped up. And then on the second platform on range side, again, I mentioned this, new ads with a kick order. That's what this is for. And again, we had our mages on that side bind the skull and the diamond kick, and also be first kick for their respective ads. And then we had a second player for the second kick on those ads. So multiple different kick orders being used in this phase. And this is that interrupt WeakAuras. I will also link this down in the description below, the interrupt anchor WeakAuras. Now let's go into the phase. Boom. So again, I am on the ranged side here. So this is a ranged POV side, which is probably better because this is where the new ads are. And so again, we are having our healer swap. I've marked the ad. The healers are getting ready to go into these. These are the shadow gates, and you can see the other healer comes out. He's got the debuff. He dispels himself. Pretty big damage intake there. That's like the biggest damage intake of this phase. Potentially also why it would be good to never swap healers, because this is actually got pretty scary, especially early on in Prague, because the healers were, the 2 healers were moving, and so it was kind of tough. So again, I think it's good to never put a healer on this with the Shadowgate changes. So I recommend doing that. Now we're going up to our platforms, and the goal here basically is that for the first 2 platforms, this side gets the first rest. So the first rest always happens here for this team, but then it's whoever's, I believe it's whoever goes up first in this for the second platform, whoever gets there faster, I think, who gets the first rest there. And so we had people just go up quickly on our side to make sure that we got the first rest. And it was very consistent. We almost always got the first rest. Sometimes when we were slow, we wouldn't, but assuming we were going at around the correct time, we would get the first rest, and that's important for our strategy. Can kind of mess things up for the other side. So initially here, you can see in the middle of my screen, bait beam. The expeller mobs that spawn, they jump around, they shoot the giant beam across the platform. That beam is always at a melee player. So what you're going to see here is the range group is going to move towards this side of the platform because a rest is going to happen, whereas the melee group is going to move to the other side of the platform to bait the expeller beam away from the ranged, and then we're going to move across here and take the actual rest attack. Again, all at the same time, I am also moving this guardian towards the expeller in order to get cleave as quickly as possible. Though again, I kind of relaxed at this point in the progression cycle because, like I said, we were killing these mobs a little bit too fast sometimes. So again, these guys get pulled up on top of each other. If you're wondering how I didn't get pulled off there, we assigned the evoker to rescue me here, though it's not needed for a guardian druid. You can just use this guy and get knocked like this way. Actually, just this way is fine too. And then you can just target this expeller and charge during the rest, and that's fine. That works as well. Any charge class can do that. Obviously, heroic leap, death advance, regular leap for demon hunters. Paladins need to run away with the ranged here, I believe, but they could also bubble. And then brewmasters have transcend, or they could go away with the group as well. Your goal here, 1 rest per side. So you want to be killing these guys relatively quickly. And you can see here the first dispels have already gone. The first dispels go around this time. You see, boom, there's when he goes, right after baiting the beam. They bait the beam and they go before the rest happens on this side, because going through the shadow gate does cancel your rest. And you can see the other person here, they're now coming in after the rest has already gone out. So again, they didn't get rested. So those 2 people basically get to ignore the rest. Very useful. He goes, he drops his thing, and then you're going to see our second player just moved there to the edge there, and they're leaving, and then our second player is coming back. And we are canceling in the middle of this rest. We did have assigned people to click on these. We don't want this rest to go off, but we don't want to go too fast because, like I said, we want to make sure everyone is here and in position. And so then we cancel it halfway through the cast. And here we're going to, I believe, send the gate up. You can see people just running up. We send the gate up. This makes it a little bit easier to have these guys grouped up because we all gate together. And so aggro on these guys was a little bit problematic at times. I think I'm probably going to lose aggro here to the Demon Hunter doing some Demon Hunter stuff. But then we go through and we're going to get the first rest here. So we're going to get the first rest. Yeah, I did actually lose to the Demon Hunter. So we are planning to have this first rest. You can see players over in the corner. We're dropping all of our webbing on this kind of half of the platform because we don't want to block off the front of us. Boom, we get pulled. And here are the 2 new ads, by the way. So they're hanging off the edge. Again, you can hit them with range abilities. You can hit them with, I think I can thrash them if I get close enough. So some AoE abilities do work, but they are just kind of far enough away that a regular melee DPS is not going to do anything to them. And so we have quite a bit of damage stacked on this platform and quite a bit of range. You can see we've got 2 warlocks, an evoker, 2 mages, and then an in-hand shaman who can also kind of hit them a fair bit. Actually, no, that's a resto shaman. I lied to you. I just lied to your face. I think our in-hand shaman is about to come in from the other side. And again, they've marked these mobs, and there's 2 kicks assigned to these mobs as they should die pretty quickly, and their kick is super long. Yeah, look, don't kick this early. Obviously, let this cast actually milk this cast so you don't need like a billion interrupts on it. Kick them after the halfway point, and our goal is to cancel again the second rest. You do not want more than 2 rests. And the other thing too, we're still baiting this beam. You're still baiting this beam here, especially on range side. You don't want to. The worst beam is beaming right here. This is the bad beam. So you can see our melee come in and we generally kind of hug here. I probably could have done a better job. I would have had like not a great beam, but not the most terrible beam if it picked me. But luckily it didn't, and it's going off to the side here. And this expeller doesn't always spawn here. Sometimes he spawns on the other side, and I assume the same is true for melee platform. So adjust melee, watch this expeller. The beam bait is almost immediately upon entering this platform. So make sure you do bait it away from your group, as well as the second beam as well on both platforms. So again, we're gonna have one more swap here. They just came out, and we want to interrupt this rest, and then we are moving up again. We use speeds to get up these bridges. They do kind of disappear much quicker than you would expect. And again, we're tanks marking these guys, and we have another kick order on these guys. And I believe actually what happened here for the most part is that we would kill this mob before the second gate on this platform. I want to say potentially we do the second gate, and then they don't need to be dispelled. Actually, that might be it. No, we just didn't do it. Yeah. So we just didn't do the second gate. If you're slow here, you can do the second gate and then not dispel them, because the debuffs will disappear when this knockback goes off. So as long as the debuff is longer than this knockback timer, you don't need to dispel them at all. So if you're not as fast as we are on this final platform, which we were pretty fast, then the second group will need to go. Just don't dispel them. And now we're going into P3, which I don't believe there's a ton to talk about for P3. Yeah, the only thing we have in P3 in this note are the essence assignments. So like I said here, the WeakAuras are going to have assignments for who's going to be picking up essences, and you can assign the spots based on markers and ads that die, basically, which we have assigned. Yeah, like this. Like we have specific ads that are assigned for us to get those essences of, and so you can assign those. And basically how this note works is you have the 3 assignments, and then these 2 are backups. So these guys will get told, hey, you have to pick up an essence if one of your assigned essence people are dead. The One thing is these backups don't get told where they need to go. They just get told that they need to do a backup. That's all that happens. I believe these ones do actually tell you which marker to pick up with based on where they are in the note. And then this is, of course, the second group where these are the 4 ads. And then these are the 3 that are dropped from the previous set, which you're going to drop in an assigned spot. And again, 2 backups. So that's how this note works in terms of the essence pickups. Now, otherwise, like I said, phase 3 is not terribly different from heroic. More stuff is happening, right? You have to deal with more of the same, essentially. But the changes they've made have actually made phase 3 a little bit easier. They've gotten rid of some of the web blades and stuff, so I'll point that out when we get to them. So you can see we immediately are dropping marks when we get in here. Again, this is just a product of us still using marks in P1. So if you guys get to a point where you don't need to use marks in P1, you don't want to have people bind it or whatever, you just want to leave the marks up here, that's totally fine. But we were just placing them down at the beginning of each phase. Again, I think this was distributed among like 4 people having these markers. So marks go down. Boss is going to be facing here, this moon right near where range side comes up. Boss is going down, and this is how we're going to deal with the mechanics in this phase. So beginning is Infest, and this is how we're always going to deal with the Infest casts. All 3 of them in this phase, I believe, are going to be dealt with in this way. We're going to run up to a pillar, not the nearest pillar, the second nearest pillar, clockwise. Second nearest pillar, clockwise. So we're going, boom. And what's going to happen here is the ranged are going to be stacked up over here, and the melee are going to be stacked up over here because, of course, during Infest, you do a big circle, you drop, it spawns some ads, and then from there, the second hit, which is Gorge, I think it's called. I don't remember what the name of it is. But Gorge, each hit spawns puddles on the ground underneath players. And so that's why we want to have a range group up, and they kind of stutter step together as stuff spawn. And you have melee group up, and they stutter step together, and that baits all these puddles along the edge of the room. Here's the Infest, and as you can see here, we did kind of swap who was doing most of the boss tanking in this phase, where the Infest tank is the one that's going to be doing most of the boss movement, whereas the other tank is not. So the DK here is doing that. So he takes the Infest, and he goes right up against this corner. I take the boss a couple steps just to buy us some initial time, and you can see melee here is on the outer ring of the circle, and they're just kind of going to stutter step together and end up on top of me. Instantly, the Ring of Peace goes down. That's the first one that goes down, and the Ursals goes down right after it. And then we also threw a binding shot down here. Another common one was Cap Totem. Could be thrown down in a few seconds, like after the Ring of Peace. Oh, and this is one actually. This is one where the Ring of Peace. I believe Ring of Peace has a limited number of hits or something. Either that or randomly one of these mobs you can see here just ignores the Ring of Peace and walks right through it, which is kind of why having an early Cap Totem is really good, because the boss was still a little close to actually proc the binding shot. So either we could have pulled the boss a little bit further away, or we could have thrown the Cap Totem earlier, which actually I don't even think Cap Totem even got thrown there. Yeah, got thrown a little late there. So that's how you can avoid that. Throw the Ursals, throw the ROP, and then throw a Cap Totem, and then do binding shot as your second stun, not your first. And these ads also spawn puddles on the ground, which is why, again, very good to keep them locked in the corner. This goes into the first ad spawn here, where we basically just pull the boss to this closest ad, and this is the one melee are just kind of cleaving onto. And then once the shield is broken, we move on to the next one and break this one's shield, and just no interrupt assignments in this phase. Just whoever is nearby gets the kick. There is a third ad towards ranged, and basically the ranged, we have like 2 Destro locks, for example. They're cleaving off of that one and over to here. And I think between the Destro locks and I think our BM hunter, they're focusing that far one to break that shield. Meanwhile, once these shields are broken, the boss just kind of hangs out between them. This web blades is gone. So basically what happens here now is the Abyssal Infusion goes out. So we ranged wants to pre-spread a little bit because these portals do tick for quite a bit of damage. And then you need to get into position. And what that is this X marker over here, right in the center. One person goes there, and then one person goes towards the pillar just past the one the melee we're at. So we just dropped our stuff here. So that triangle mark is where the other one goes. And again, use a little bit of common sense for this first one in particular. This guy is right there. This guy is right over here. This guy's not going to go to X. This guy's going to triangle, right? And obviously, if there's someone really close to X, you should go to triangle. if you're that person. We also, for the second set specifically, have our Holy Priest stand on X and immediately life grip someone, because we're going to be very far away. And we'll get that in a second, but that can be very useful. And I believe there's a talent technically Holy Priest can take where they can do that both times. You could also throw a rescue here. And like I said, these web blades are gone. They're deleted. They don't exist anymore, which makes getting to your spot significantly easier to do. And it makes it significantly easier to use things like rescue. You could totally assign rescue on a player to get them immediately to X if you wanted to on this set. Makes it much makes it a little bit easier and eliminates some of the thinking. If you don't get rescued, then you are going to triangle, for example. Now we get the essence pickup. So yeah, this one I lied. This one doesn't tell you where to pick up. Just go to your assigned spots, pick up your essence. And like I said, now on Mythic, after 14 seconds, this essence is falling back down on the ground. So you do want to make sure you don't pick up your essence too early. You want to have enough time to actually take this portal in a few seconds and then spread out and then drop your essence after that, which is why I picked it up relatively late. These spread spots, I believe, were loosely assigned. Again, the cleaving is not the end of the world. You'd much rather cleave someone than eat one of these orbs. These orbs hurt way, way, way more than the actual circle AoE. So if you had to pick between cleaving your friends, and you can see I'm dropping this soon, so I move forward a little bit. I want to try and drop these, and I get hit by a web blade. You want to try and drop these kind of around where we did. So there's like a few kind of clustered around here, not on top of someone else, because that's not ideal. And anyone who, you don't want to ever pick up an essence. You want to make sure you are avoiding essences if you are not an assigned player, or if it is not the assigned time. And the essences all go down here so people kind of know where they are. And then we're immediately going to have an infest. So again, we don't go to the closest free one. We go to the second closest free one clockwise. Ranged, go to the closest one. Melee, go here. This is a repeat of what we just did. Repeat. So again, we get the guy. I pull him slightly away. Ring of Peace goes down. Ursul's goes down. Binding goes down. These mobs get cleaved. They get pulled in by the Ursuls. We dodge the web blades by jumping up on the ceiling, and now we get the first shackles of the phase. So these shackles are real. Where these shackles go, right here to this closest mob. Now we cleaved off that closest mob in the previous set. There's going to be 4 of these acolytes now. So now these guys are going to the closest mob, and we're going to that one that we ignored, that the range were hitting before. We're going to stack in an AMZ here. These guys are going to press personals or get externals, and they're going to stack up in a little triangle like this. They could have been a little bit closer even. You can get a little triangle essentially, and then the boss gets pulled over directly on top of them, and these guys get cleaved down. We hard focus this just by being over in that first place. Should get this first acolyte shield cleared. This guy gets owned when we're killing the shackles, and in this whole time, you see the ranged are actually hitting these far ones now. Because the boss gets pulled to this close one, that gets cleaved down by melee. So the ranged have been hitting these far ones. You can see the chaos bolts and all those stuff going out here. So these are where they're hitting so that we can get interrupts on them quicker. And the boss just kind of go ring around the rosy here. We kill all these, and we end up going back to that initial spot because here are the portals again, little pre-spread. We've rotated slightly. So this was the previous X and the previous triangle. We've rotated 2 segments of this hexagon. This is the X, this is the diamond, or the triangle, sorry. So same spots on the ground, but just rotated 2 segments. These go out, and this is where you we would get a life grip. I think we get a good spawn here, so let's just watch real quick. But this is where our priest would instantly life grip whoever is in melee, especially if someone in melee got it. That was the big one, because melee DPS can get this, and specifically like if it's like our DK DPS, right? Like what is he gonna do to book it over here? It's tough because this also had web blades going out. These web blades again are deleted. They no longer exist. You can just straight book it to your spot. Makes it much easier, but we just had our priest life grip instantly someone to X, and then again use your brain here a little bit. Closest person to X goes to X, other person goes to triangle, and then we have the next ring. So again, this is where the next assigned people would go. Call for backups. I think we called for a late backup here, and I end up picking up one as a backup, showing that, again, as a tank, you can pick it up, press a defensive as a tank. It's not the end of the world. It does hurt. It does hurt, but you can do it. Right? I have the debuff here for 10 more seconds. I just ripped a bark skin, and that covers for like most of the debuff duration. I'm getting chunked by this, but it's not the end of the world. And now we have these shackles. These shackles also deleted. They don't exist anymore. Don't worry about the strategy in the lock gate. Both of the lock gates that we used on our strat no longer are needed in P1 and P3, so don't worry about those at all. And now we basically you just move and do the same thing you did in the previous phases when we moved. You drop all these things down kind of wherever, just a little closer if you can, but not the end of the world really, because you're going to be killing the boss very shortly. And then you're just moving to do the next infest on, again, the second closest pillar. Closest pillar is ranged. I missed talking about the Bloodlust. So our Bloodlust was just before the second infest. Here, yeah, we literally just press the Bloodlust right after these web blades. We press Bloodlust as we move to the second infest. And basically this kind of like synced up our cooldowns to have them for this point. Second pots is available at this point, and this also kind of goes into the next ad set and makes killing those ad sets and this ad set a little bit easier. Again, with the increase in damage, the increasing eye level people are getting, I don't think this is super necessary anymore. It also helps you kill these shackles, I believe. Where is our lust ending? Yeah, we have 13 seconds of lust still, so it basically helps kill all this stuff initially, which is pretty value lust. And again, I can definitely see you potentially keeping this lust, but it's certainly worse for overall boss damage compared to on pull. And boss damage in P1 helps you a lot, right? It lets you skip more of this stuff later on in the phase. And I'm not super concerned about the health of these acolytes or the damage going out. I think potentially it's still good to do that on pull lust, but again, you can also do this lust if you find you're struggling with this sequence of killing the ads, killing the first shackles, and breaking the shield of the next ads in time. You can move your lust there if you want. This is the third one. Like I said, we're killing these shackles. These shackles don't exist for you, so we're then going straight into the corner, same positioning as the previous two infests, where stuff's going down. Ursul's and Romp would do a bit of a weird positioning there because of the shackles. You won't need to do that. Owning these ads, and then we're turning around, and again, this is kind of the exact same as the previous phase, where the shackles that are about to spawn go to the close ad. Boom, they go to the close ad, and we move to the AMZ, which is kind of closer to this ad over here. And then the goal here is to just passively cleave these ads down. Normally, again, we would be a little bit further probably, and just kill the boss. You can also see we had a calm to just get these shackles out because the boss was so low. That's kind of your goal too, is to just kind of never have to worry about these shackles. If you get here and the boss is like sub 5% damage, you can tell these shackles to just get the hell out, and that heavily mitigates your group damage. Again, sub 5% for sure is totally fine for this. Again, we're 2% here, so this boss is getting owned, and potentially this boss is dead if you lust on pull, so you never need to worry about these shackles. Again, another big reason to potentially lust on pull. It lets you avoid this massive raid hit and raid damage from these casts all going off, because there's 4 guys here again on this phase. You can see how much damage that did even with them running out, but I guess this is the actual player with the debuff. So we stack up in this AMZ and this Spirit Link, and we just kill the boss. Boom. So yeah, P3 I think is probably on the easier end. P1's probably still one of the harder phases. It's a bit of a dance to get used to, but they've helped eliminate some of those spooky overlaps with the changes to web blades, as well as the changes to the toxin, which is pretty nice. And again, eliminating one of those shackles, also very nice, and 2 of the web blades that overlap with the portals there. So that is Queen ANSUREK. Hopefully I covered everything that you guys need to know. Hopefully this video was useful to you guys, and if it was, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it. I'm putting out 0.1% title route walkthroughs, kind of going through more advanced strategies in the keys of the season, and of course I'll be doing all the guide stuff again next season, so make sure you are subscribed. As always, thank you to all of my amazing Patreons for their continued support and making content like this possible. Could not do it without you, so thank you, and I'll see everyone in the next video.